All right, folks. Well, today on Do You Know Jack, I've got Tommy of Forbidden Dimension on the line with me, a guy that I've kind of been wanting to talk to off and on the entire time I've been doing this whole thing. So it's great to have you on today, Tommy.
That's great to be asked to be on here.
Yeah, well, here's like a weird question off the top, but, when I was just scanning through different, social media and print and things like that with the band, I noticed on iTunes there's a Forbidden Dimension and a The Forbidden Dimension, which seems like it's the same.
It's the same
It's
thing.
the same thing, yeah.
Yeah, on iTunes. Yeah, I think I don't know what album is on iTunes. I think it might have been like the
Golden Age of Lasers, I
yeah,
think
Golden
is.
Age of Lasers, and then we did another one for that same label, the Cool Sound Out of Hell.
That's right, yeah.
And yeah, it depends on what how lazy I am when I'm doing the lettering for the cover. Usually.
Well, yeah, I mean, you do all
Well,
the
like
art for...
the idea was like I used to like bands like Sweet were sometimes The Sweet and
Yeah.
sometimes just Sweet, and Blue Oyster Cult was The Blue Oyster Cult on one record, and I just always thought that was kind of cool, but yeah, it wasn't like a major, it's not a big deal.
Well, yeah, now I've always thought that putting the in front of your band name kind of makes you more punk rock because there's so many punk rock bands, classic punk rock bands that are, the Sex Pistols or the Clash or,
Yeah, that was always good.
I
But
don't know if
then
it
you don't
changed.
have The Motorhead either, so it's like, okay, that's all right. Or The Eater, like it, so it can go either way.
That's true. That's true. Well, we were talking before I hit record about how you've been at this whole rock and roll punk rock thing for a good, well, probably 35 years ish, somewhere in
Yeah,
that
it's around
ballpark.
there. Yeah, I started Color Me Psycho in '85,
Mm-hmm.
and like I'm still playing with the same drummer. It's been off and on with him because he was doing different projects. Like when we
Mm-hmm.
were when I switched over and started Forbidden Dimension in '88, he was doing. We were all kind of like tired of playing with each other at that point. We're still friends and everything, but we didn't want to be in bands that were serious or anything. So we'd always have these kind of like little side projects,
Mm-hmm.
kind of going off and on. And then he actually came and was playing. We're talking P.T. Bonham here, but he was
Mm-hmm.
under 8 million different names, like me. Um, yeah, he was. So yeah, Color Me Psycho. Now it was about 3 years, and then when I started FD, he went off and was doing a bunch of other different projects. But then he actually played for a couple of years around 1990, 91, and then he left and was doing this band called the Primrods
Mm-hmm.
for a long time, and that's when I was kind of doing all the Cargo era Forbidden Dimension stuff and around there. And then we actually we started it was kind of at the end of the Cargo era in around 97, 98.
Mm-hmm.
We started joking around with this sort of like a status quo type English hard rock tribute band thing called the English Teeth, and we ended up doing music for Fubar. Trying to think when that was. It was like around 2001, 2002, I guess.
Yeah.
And then I started FD up, and it sort of for the English Teeth, just kind of like all the guys that were in that. Most of them, they sort of ended up in Forbidden Dimension at some point. It kind of because I started it going again, and it just kind of morphed back into that. So
Fair
there's
enough.
no escape for me.
Well, yeah, I mean, you've been, like I said, you've been doing this a good while. I mean, just thinking back though to early '80s Calgary. I mean, it's not necessarily the first city that comes to mind when you think of punk rock in North America or even Canada, for that matter.
Yeah, well, there was good. Well, there was punk rock here. I bought the Hot Nasties record and the Sturgeons, which
Mm-hmm.
are the same. It's P.T. Bonham was in the Sturgeons, so I bought a record with him on it when I was 15, and then ended up playing with him. But it was yeah. There's always been some bands. There was a band, I think the Verdicts were kind of. A lot of these groups started up around 78, 79,
Mm-hmm.
and around there. And of course, Personality Crisis was sort of a half Calgary, half Winnipeg band. There was, Riot 303, Beyond Possession were from here.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's always been, kind of a scene.
Was it a kind of isolated scene? Like, did you see touring bands come through
Yeah,
Calgary much?
well, like we're not that far from Vancouver, so there was always DOA and stuff like that would come through,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and but those and like I say, there was kind of the cross pollination of Winnipeg bands that would come out here. So yeah, and it's a long haul. I mean, it's like we're talking. It's always like at least a 12-hour drive to get to another giant city here. So not that this is a giant city, but
Yeah.
yeah, it is. There is definitely a sense of isolation, but it's kind of like I think when people would kind of hook up, it would be that much more special because they traveled that much further. So
Did it create a Calgary sound that's sort of
no, I
unique in
don't know.
terms of it, or was it just?
Yeah, I don't really think so. There's always been like where we came from was kind of the more of the like a garage rock
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing, which was definitely kind of a '60s based thing, and that was like the same kind of scene that Von Zippers, Al, he was a Color Me Psycho guy as well,
Mm-hmm.
and Huevos Rancheros, and that they were all kind of in garage bands around in the mid '80s as well. So
Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, now you started up Forbidden Dimension in '88, and of course, next year you'll be, celebrating the big 3-0.
yeah, that's kind of weird. Well, it's I think a lot of the longevity is just because it's kind of always been almost like a solo project for me, and then
Yeah.
so it's just like the revolving door. I've had a really good the last probably since 2005 when we kind of started it up again. It's been the turnover of members hasn't been as fast
Yeah.
as it was back in the day. We always had kind of a revolving door of bass players and
Yeah.
stuff like that, but it's been pretty steady. I mean, we had a different drummer on Cool Sound of the Hell, but then P.T. Bonham finished the drum parts and the the percussion on that. And that when was that? That was 2006. We were recording that. 2007 it came out,
Mm-hmm.
and he's been with us ever since. And then we had changed bass players, and that's about it. So it's pretty steady.
Yeah. I mean,
think as we get older, I don't want to start a band over.
well, this doesn't surprise me though, because I know kind of historically when you did first start up Forbidden Dimension, it was meant to be almost exclusively a solo project, and then somewhere along the way you ended up picking a couple extra folks up and sort of forming more of a trio type situation. But I don't think the very first record was just all you, was it not?
Yeah, it's just drum machine.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really even supposed to come out. I just did it for fun because I was still doing Color Me Psycho at the time.
Yeah.
And it ended up coming out, and then it was sort of like, okay, I got to play live. But it sort of sucks playing live with that drum machine. I mean, I've done it a couple of times, and it's sort of
Yeah. Well, do you
it's
attribute
okay, kind of in a weird artsy way, like if you're doing a real small
Yeah.
kind of thing, like like at almost like in an art gallery or like that kind of a thing, but it works in that context. But as soon as you got to be playing like a regular bar or something, it's nice to have drums and bass.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, could some of this longevity even be attributed not just to the fact that it's kind of your baby, but also just because it was sort of meant to be a side project, so maybe you didn't stress it as much?
Yeah, well, it wasn't ever like when we got signed in the '90s to Cargo, and that was like totally by accident. I mean, we weren't like, we got to make the big time, or anything. Because for me, it's always this cult. It's like cult horror band, right? It's like I'm really into the old horror movies and horror, old weird tales and stuff like that. So it's always been kind of a vehicle for like an art project because I draw this stuff as well. So I kind of keep it. It's like an expanded art project, and it just kind of keeps going. But it's not. It's just basic kind of. Wasn't intended to be a career or anything like that. So that's probably another reason why it's longevity, because it's always been just for fun.
Yeah, like I've found with my own music, like I'm a trained musician, as it were. Like, I mean, I went to music school and all that, but the second with my own weird campy punk rock tunes, the second I stopped taking music so seriously, it seemed as though things sort of took off a lot more for me when I stopped worrying about all of the rules and all the rest of it. So
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
I can definitely relate to just having something that's purely there for your own personal enjoyment, and then, well, I mean, if other people happen to like it, then so be it.
yeah. Well, like for myself, like I tend to like to play stuff that's pretty accessible.
Yeah,
I'm not like I'm not really into extreme, crazy,
yeah,
like sort of vocals or anything like that. I'm kind of I kind of grew up listening to Kiss and stuff like that, so I kind of like
yeah,
a sort of a pop sensibility in whatever I'm doing. So I like to have hooks because otherwise it just gets kind of goofy for me. But
yeah.
yeah, I like to have lots of hooks and everything. It ain't a tune if it ain't got the hooks. So and that's just and that's just for me what I enjoy playing and what I would like to hear. If I'm gonna go buy a rock record or something that's gotta it's gotta sound kind of cool.
For sure. Well, you mentioned getting signed by Cargo Records in the '90s. Was this in the early '90s when the whole grunge bonanza was happening?
Yeah, it was kind of around '93. We inked. It was just like a 3-album deal, and then they went under anyway. So that's about as far as it would have gone. But it wasn't like we didn't have to tour or anything. It was they would they'd send us money. We'd go in and record, and then they'd manufacture it, and that was about it. Yeah, it was really good. We wanted to tour. We did a little bit of stuff just out in Western Canada, but we didn't really get any support from those guys. They were find your own booking agent, and I was like, okay, okay, fine.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that business model definitely wouldn't work in this day and age, I hate to say.
no, and it didn't. It wasn't something like I didn't really relish the idea of like being away from home for a long time. I'm kind of a shut-in guy, so it's not like extreme, but I like to I like to sleep in my own bed and stuff like that. So it's so my own coffin, as it were. But yeah, and it's and I had young kids and stuff around that sort of towards the end of that period anyway, so I really didn't want to be away from them.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely don't blame you there.
Yeah. But yeah, we still had fun, still got out of town. Like I say, it was all Western Canada. Like we went it was Winnipeg and Victoria and all points in between kind of thing. Then it's like recently we started playing the States a lot more. I mean, we went down. We've been to New York last year. We've been to Nashville a couple of times. I think we went to Vegas one time in the '90s, and that's it. So like none of this, we're gonna go under the lake, that kind of stuff. So.
Well, I can imagine now with the advent of the internet that it might be more, easier to, peddle what might be potentially seen as a bit of a niche product with the horror rock and the different aspects of what you do artistically and musically, right?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny because I think even as far as like cult horror bands go, we're still like most people still haven't heard of us. It's really funny. It's like, we never get mentioned or anything, but it's and then there's like a few people that's like, oh my god, I can't believe he didn't mention Forbidden Dimension. But there's a couple other horror bands that I know of that were around a lot longer than a lot of these ones, and that you never hear about Deadbolt when people do these giant lists of like the greatest horror rock bands of all time. Like, there's just always these groups that always seem to get overlooked, so it's okay.
Yeah.
I don't take it personally.
Have you guys ever worked with the Darkest of the Hillside Thickets out west?
Never worked with. We played with them in Vancouver one time, I think. That was about it. Yeah, no, I don't really know those guys.
Yeah,
we're pretty insular with we're going.
Yeah.
The closest we get to hanging out with other horror bands is more recently, and it's like groups like the Creeping Cruds from Nashville. And, I've done some drawings and stuff for Mumula out of Columbus, Ohio. And, I did a Bobby Steele record cover, that Undead guy. That's there's a Misfits connection there. So
that's cool.
Somewhere down the line there.
I brought up the Thickets because they're from my hometown of Chilliwack, British Columbia.
Oh yeah, nice.
I kind of they're friends of friends,
guys?
so to speak. Like I don't know them really well. I mean, Torin and I talk off and on, and I've been following what they've been doing lately. Like they just dropped an album themselves.
Hmm.
So,
They've been going forever too. So
yeah, yeah. Well, I know now maybe they've been going since 90 or 91. I remember Torin coming over to my house and on cassette playing the first ever demo they ever made. I'm not
hmm
sure what kind of random 4-track or whatever they had made it on, but
yeah.
that's how
Well, that was
far back I
definitely
go
the
with
age
those
of the
dudes.
that was the age of the random 4-track back then. That's well, it was kind of cool. That's how I like the first FD thing that I did was just it was actually I didn't even have a 4-track. I had 2 tape recorders, and I did the drum machine
Hmm.
and the rhythm guitar on one, and then plugged it into another tape deck. So that was like the left channel, and then I did singing and lead guitar out of the right channel, and that was just like that was how, it was 100% stereo separation on that old stuff. And then
Nice.
it was like when I borrowed a 4-track from Brent Cooper from Huevos Rancheros, and I don't even think he had Huevos Rancheros going at that point. I hadn't even started yet, but now it was just like, wow, there's reverb on here, and you could do panning and all this stuff. It was just like a really big deal, but you still limited to like 4 things on there, so that's
Yeah.
why there's never any bass. It was just it was 2 guitars, 100% pan, the hard left, hard right, and it just seemed big. Like it sounded really big and heavy, and I was just
Hmm.
like, it was really cool.
Yeah, we were fortunate in the early 90s. We were all band nerds, so to speak, and our band teacher
You mean like high school band?
yeah, high school
When you say
band
band
nerds,
nerd,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
We were
yeah.
allowed to use the band room after hours in the school's PA system, and we were able to run that everything through a tape deck and record our own, sort of low rent
Yeah,
demos. That's as far as we ever went, but I mean, at least we
that's
had
because
the
you
outlet.
graduated from high school, right? So then you couldn't keep going back. It's a limited time offer.
That's right. That's right. Well, our drummer was like older than all of us, and he had already graduated. And ironically, it was our drummer that the band director liked the most and gave the keys to the band room too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like when I was in high school, I was the oldest guy in my band that I had in grade 12. We weren't really punk rock. I was sort of into like basement Black Sabbath kind of stuff. That's what I was kind of trying for with a bit of, kind of as a big Dan fan. So I'd sort of throw that kind of stuff into. But
Hmm.
it was the other guys in the band were all 2 grades younger than me. So I was out of school the next year, and I think they were both kind of band nerd guys, and they moved over to a different school and stuff. But yeah, it was kind of that weird that kind of that time when those guys are all still in high school, and I'm kind of like in college by that point and everything. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, now speaking of records, I mean, not too long ago, you guys released a full length. It's a morbid, morbid, morbid world, which I'm
yeah,
assuming is a send off to the original movie. It's a mad, 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 mad world. I think there might be 4
yeah, I
mads.
think I got lazy once again.
You
Left the morbid off.
yeah, yeah. You needed an extra morbid in there, but I was like,
Well, there's
meh.
more syllables too,
I,
so it had more of a ring to it with just 3 morbids in there.
that's true. That's true. Couldn't maybe you couldn't draw all those words on the album
Yeah,
cover either.
I was running out of room underneath because I wanted it to kind of hook under the lettering for the Forbidden Dimension logo there. So, yeah. Too
But
smaller, and it goes down to like 5-point type, and nobody can read the damn thing. So.
yeah, but this is a follow up, obviously, to Golden Age of Lasers. Except I think it's the first time that your new-ish bass player Virginia Dentata
Yeah,
is recording with you guys. Am I right?
yeah, that's true. Yeah, and yeah, she's been with us. I think this is our 4th Halloween coming up, where she had joined. She's married to the PD Bonham, so it was funny because we would be practicing and with HP Love Sauce, the old bass guy, and then there got to a point where he wasn't coming to practice anymore. She would be upstairs here, and me and just me and drums, and she was like, "God damn it!" So she used to play in Pussy Monster back in the '90s, and she played in the Ex-Boyfriends for a few years, kind of Calgary B-punk bands, and she learned all our, like, we had to play, and so I had to let HP go because he couldn't make practice anymore. It was one of those things. I think it's like that curse of having guitar players as bass players where they get bored playing bass, but she's actually just knows how to play bass. And she actually sat down and tabbed out about 40 songs, I think, and learned them in 2 months so we could have these Halloween gigs and stuff. So
Yeah.
I was like, all right, she's in.
I think
and she's
now
there anyway. She lives there, so she was always
Yeah.
at practice. So it was like, okay.
Well, now I was reading a recent interview that you guys posted with a different publication, and you mentioned that she has more formal music education than anybody else in the band. So I'm curious to know
So
what
she's
that
she's
formal
one of those
is.
piano girls, right, that went and did the Royal Conservatory. So she can actually sit down and at a piano. If somebody has sheet music, she can sit there and, and blast through it. Beyond me, but yeah, it's. But she, somebody, I think it was somebody from Chicks Dig It. She used to live with, I think Mark from Chicks Dig It, and he actually showed her how to tab. He was one of these guitar guys that knew how to do that, and so she figured it out. So she's actually tabbed out all of the FD songs that she knows, which I think just hit she's over 100 songs that she knows. But they're all, so there is actually like a grimoire of like bass tabs for all our stuff, which is really, to me, it's really funny to see it. It's like, what?
Yeah.
I can't read that stuff. So it's
Well, now, where's your background? Are you one of these guitar players that sort of learned just by playing along with records,
well, I was
in the late
a piano
70s?
guy when I was a little kid. I played, my mom had me in piano lessons for about 5 years, so I knew some music basics, like difference between minor and major and all that kind of stuff. And I wanted to be a guitar guy, so I talked my dad into getting me a couple of cheap guitars in the early days.
Yeah.
And then just self-taught. And I didn't really copy records. I started like, I figured out how to do make the bar chord sound like, the two-string bar chord, like a Ramones kind of a thing. And it was, I'd kind of copy styles of bands that were kind of easy to emulate. So I remember the first guy that I really thought I could play like was Ron Ashton from the Stooges, because he had that really simple, it sounded like a big muff he was playing through, and I had a big muff, and I could kind of emulate what he was doing, even though I was, trying to be Judas Priest or whatever at the time. But it was like, hey, I can play like this guy, that sort of sounds like a kazoo. So I could do that kind of like kazoo lead back then, and that was, but I would be trying to write my own stuff. Like I was always trying to come up with my own songs. It wasn't like, I'm going to learn how to play, I want to be your dog or anything. It was like, I'm going to write a new one.
Yeah. Well, now that you've also said there's some jazz influences in your playing too, right? I mean,
yeah, that's kind of come later. That's my dad was he was a big jazz guy. He had a bunch of, he got this huge record collection that I've inherited of, like Wes Montgomery and all this kind of stuff. But I really like a lot of the, there's kind of like a 50s jazz guitar sound that's really cool. Like I don't actually, can't do that stuff. It's all crazy chords and things, but I just I can kind of do a fake version of it that I'll throw in just as, for a couple of bars. Bleep, bleep, bloop kind of thing.
Yeah.
You can hear it in some of that stuff, but it's just I like the ambience of that, and it adds kind of a B-movie feel to it, and it's good. It's good stuff.
Well,
good diversify, but not too much.
How does your own process work then? Because I know some of the songs on this new record potentially date back 7 to 10 years. So, I mean, obviously you're keeping material around for future use. Like you're not throwing a whole lot away?
A lot of the time I'll have a riff that I really like, but maybe the lyrics aren't there, and I don't want to rush it. There's no point in rushing this stuff, so it'll kind of come as needed.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of delve in. There's a few. There's one. I think Dimension Ech used to be a song way back in around 1989 that we did, but it was like the current version. It's like really fast. It's like a halftime kind of damned sort of thing. But originally it was kind of a slower, kind of almost like a psychedelic thing. And it's just the only thing that's remained is just like the chord progression.
Mm-hmm.
But the lyrics are different, and the tempo is obviously different, and the arrangement changes and stuff over time. So it's kind of, that's the thing. Like when you're not under pressure to, when nobody's expecting you to do a new record or anything, you don't have to. You can kind of like, all right,
Yeah.
you know, you have this. I think about most bands that are around forever are kind of like that to a degree. They'll have, you'll hear, there'll be some bootleg of a live recording where they've expanded something, and then it's that riff shows up 5 years later in a different form.
Mm-hmm.
Like Led Zeppelin, I guess, is a good example, where there'd be like some 20-minute live version of something, and then the little improv break in the middle ends up being the main riff of a tune 3 albums later. Just that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's pretty common.
Yeah.
Recycle, reuse. It's green.
Yeah. You released this record April 1st too, which, you know, that's a pretty eccentric date to be pulling a record out of your ass from.
Virginia Dantata's birthday right then. So.
Oh, really?
But, well, we
double whammy then.
Lon Chaney Sr.'s birthday is April Fool's as well. But actually, we had to cancel. I got really sick, and we had to do it about 3 weeks later. So and then I got sick again because my wife got my cold and then gave it back to me. So
oh boy,
I was like, God damn it, should have done it originally. But yeah, that was it. And we did there was also a release came out last year that came out of Winnipeg that Every Twisted Tree Watches As You Pass, which is this guy Patrick. He's got this label called Sounds Escaping, and he's kind of gotten kind of big recently just because he did the Personality Crisis and substance issues. But yeah, he did a 2 CD set with like all their singles and compilation tracks.
Nice.
On it. That's a 2-disc thing. That's got a big booklet and everything. So that was kind of fun doing that last year, and just kind of going through and trying to write some liner notes for it and everything, find artwork.
Sure.
So that was a project.
I'm curious to know how you guys ended up playing Calgary Folk Fest. I would have loved to see you had I known you were there, because I was actually at the Stampede this summer. So I was down there.
Yeah, it was at the other end of July.
Yeah.
But well, we're friends with people that run the Folk Fest, and I think it was just there. You know, like we can play different volume levels and stuff like that. It's not all full on. So
yeah,
they I think just threw us a bone. I think it was like a sympathy thing. So we went over really well. It was really fun. We did a bunch of those workshops, where you're playing with other performers, and you have to kind of jam on tunes, and the workshops that we were involved in seemed to be pretty they went well, because a lot of those ones you get the guys sit there and they're all just sitting around watching the one guy do his tune, and then it's their turn to do one and stuff. And
you never know how those things are going to work.
Well, we played with this the first one we did worked out really good. We were with this band, the Iguanas, from New Orleans, and they're kind of got a bit of a garagey kind of R&B jazz kind of thing with this. They got a sax player and stuff, and we just hit it off. Like all the stuff we were able to play on their stuff, and they played on ours, and it worked out really well.
Cool. Yeah.
Noodly leads over top everybody else's songs.
Yeah.
Ace Frehley guitar solos on top of everything.
There you go. Well, I can imagine now in a 30-some-odd career, you've probably shared the stage with some pretty interesting folks, eh?
Yeah, well, especially back in the 90s when there was a lot more kind of touring bands we get stuck on the bills with. We played a bunch of times with groups like Urge Overkill, and we played with Babes in Toyland, New Model Army, and whatever the bands that were coming through, we'd always end up opening. So it was pretty fun.
Yeah.
It's kind of like nowadays when there's bands, they always get a lot of younger groups opening and stuff like that. We're kind of too past the point here. Trying to think of the last time we played with a big. I think we played with the Misfits, and that was almost 10 years ago.
That would have been interesting, although that wouldn't have been the reunited Misfits.
No, it was it was the Des Cadena version, but which just funny because I was actually a big DC3 fan back in the '80s. I was his kind of his heavy metal band that he had
Uh-huh.
going. That guitar guy, he used to play Black Flag. That was kind of his claim to fame there. But
Yeah, for sure. Well, listen now. I know your 30th is coming up in 2018. Apparently, you're going to be releasing a record to coincide with that. So, I mean, have you guys already started to think about material or even write
yeah, we're
anything?
kind of working on it. We'll probably record in the spring, so that gives me. It's almost like it might come too fast. I'm hoping that the material's there. We've got a lot of riffs and stuff, but it's kind of like need a couple of good beefy ones in there. But there's going to be some revisiting of some old stuff on it as well. So,
Uh-huh. Cool.
yeah, it should be fun.
Well, listen, man.
I'll be good on it.
Yeah. Well, listen, man. I appreciate you chatting with me today on Do You Know Jack. Definitely a long time coming, and I'm glad we got the opportunity.
Yeah, no, it's been a total pleasure.
Right on. Well, hopefully
Excellent.
we'll be able to get down and see you guys play down in Cowtown one of these days. I mean, every summer we're usually out and about doing something, so who knows.
Yeah, we always do. We always do our little annual Halloween show at there's a place, the Oak Tree. It's really small, and I love playing there because there's no opening band. It's just us. We do 2 sets, and then we usually play there twice a year. One time, kind of in the spring, around April Fools, and then we usually do Halloween.
Cool.
And stuff, and then a bunch of whatever other shows get thrown at us there.
Right on.
Do that stuff.
Well, thanks,
Excellent,
Tommy,
yeah.
for chatting with me about all things Forbidden Dimension and beyond today. Thanks a lot, man, and we'll chat with you soon, hopefully.